All righty. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Strategy Roundtable. Today, we're welcoming Matt Quammen, founder of Optimized Cyber. He's going to be teaching us a little bit about how cyber attackers conduct financial fraud. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Zach.
For sure. Before we dive into the topic of today about financial fraud, we're going to learn a little bit about Matt and your entrepreneurial journey. How did you get to Optimize Cyber?
Well, I was born on a snowy day. My entrepreneurial journey, the first business I started was cutting grass when I was a kid. My dad had an HVAC company. My grandpa was a chiropractor with his own clinic. So you could say some of it's in our blood, but honestly, that wasn't my plan to go co-found a business to pursue this method. I saw all the headaches those folks, my dad went through, and my uncles and grandpa and my aunt to a lesser, all of them to a lesser extent than I obviously see now. But I knew 10% of the headaches, and I knew it was a lot of headaches. So anyway, my start in technology was back in 2011. I got started at Oracle. Really got recruited in. I had studied accounting and finance, so I'm not naturally a technology lover. But
Forgive me for interrupting you. What did you think about the technology industry before you got into it?
In a lot of ways, I still hate technology. I'd rather be in log cabins with even though my dad was an HVAC, I'd rather have a log fire than a furnace. So I don't love technology just for its capabilities, if that makes sense, not for the blinky lights and the cool features. What I love about technology is how it can help people run their business faster, operate their lives better, run things more efficiently, save money, safeguard their business, and do more with less. So I'd say I'm a fan of automation and the business impact that technology can have. But by nature, I'm not. I'm old enough. I never figured out how to put a song on my cell phone. Luckily, then Spotify solved that problem for me. But I think I was one of the few people who couldn't figure that out. So I'm not technology. I'm not a native technologist. I'm certainly not an early adopter. But so
you got recruited into Oracle, which is
recruited's a light word, but I got encouraged into Oracle. Let's say it's not like a headhunter was knocking on my door every day begging me to come there. They were doing just fine without me. But I got encouraged to go there based on my backgrounds in accounting and finance. And once I found out my job wasn't to say, hey, look at these features and functionality and how the middleware flows into the applications and all the beautiful user interfaces. And, that's not my thing. But when I found out that they wanted me to come in and say, that's all great, but why do we do this, right? Why do we want to implement this? It's because we're going to save 6 million calls away from our call center, and those cost $5 a call. So you're going to save $30 million a year. That's why you want to pay us $300,000 or whatever, make that business case and help people understand the real impact that technology has rather than just the fun, cool features and things like that. So that was my start in technology. Had bounced around, learned a lot at Oracle, spent 4 great years there, bounced around some different startups, and eventually, similar to my Oracle story, got into security because somebody recruited me and said, hey, I need a Midwest director, regional director for the Midwest. And the dogs don't bother me. Don't worry, Zach.
These goofy cats are fighting like dogs. My goodness.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, the cats bother me then. I'm allergic. Just kidding.
I'll make sure. I'll keep them wrangled.
So security was a similar story for me, and I said the same thing. Hey, I'm an applications. I know about applications and marketing apps and CRM apps and that kind of stuff. What do I know about security? And the truth is, I didn't know anything. But thank goodness I listened to that chief revenue officer, because my first week on the job, we got to help an HVAC company, very similar to my dad's HVAC company that I grew up in. 50 employees, 60 employees, something that obviously doesn't make the news. If they go under, GDP is not taking a hit, right? So on the macro level, they don't matter at all. But in the town I grew up in with 1,000 people, 1,000 people, call that 400 households. 50 jobs is a big difference. That's over 10% of the mortgages, right? Yeah. So immediately, like my first week on the job, maybe first 10 days, we got to help an HVAC company just like my dad's. And I said, wait, you didn't tell me the job is we get to help small and mid-sized businesses and help them survive an incident and protect their company. I knew at a high level we were helping protect companies, but it wasn't until I saw that first impactful moment that I thought, whoa, we're actually getting to protect the American dream. What a beautiful industry to get to spend a career in.
That's the right way to think about it. And I also really love the way that you think about, you made a really interesting point. At a macro, this size business doesn't make, isn't going to affect GDP, I think was the point you made. But at a micro, it affects 400 households or whatever the number was 4,400 households. I think from a economic perspective and maybe a political perspective, breaking down these statistics into the micro, like you just did, is a major frontier that we need to get to. And the reason that I think that is because we look at the economy at a macro, like you just said, but the micro is where the seeds are planted for the future success of the macro. And if you're failing your micro everywhere and you're just looking at like a couple of large centers of value and saying, we're in good shape. And what happens in a Domino's franchise is when you have only 2 good employees, when one of those leaves, then you're really struggling. And the same thing is true in an economy. If you only have one major facilitator of jobs in a small town, if you lose that, or if you lose one of the 2, what happens to those people? And if you have too much failed micro, then you fail at a macro level, but it's so easy to dismiss the micro. So the way that you're thinking about that, I think I'm going to digest more. And I think we need to figure out how to talk like that about our economies, whether it's, state and local or at the federal level, being able to talk about where the micro is. But I think that's a wonderful way to approach it. And that's like a really strong intrinsic motivator for where you're holding what it is you're doing. I want to ask you about, you said that you had the experience of your family being entrepreneurial and kind of getting to see some of the stressors at a young age that somebody that's in entrepreneurship goes through. Can you break apart what some of those were that you saw as a young person that maybe made you feel like, I don't know if I want to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. And these are family connections. So you're only getting about 1% of it, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I'll say that I watched my dad spend after dinner, 6:30 to midnight, many, many times in good times. These were good times, right? Smoking a carton of cigarettes in the garage and filling out, I don't have a yellow legal pad here. He'd be ashamed of me for not doing my debits and credits on a yellow legal pad, but he'd be out there bookkeeping end of every month till midnight. I'm not saying he disliked it or anything like that, but
had to happen.
It's certainly a stressful mode of being. So my friend Rick Rowley, I should get you this white paper. He wrote it recently, really talking about small business ownership and really starting your own endeavor as personal growth. That's something most people don't talk about to business owners, but it's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to go from 1 million to 5 million, 5 million to 10 million. I have respect for people who went 1 million to a trillion, right? Obviously that whole journey is difficult, but I think the 0 to 1 million from what most people I talk to, that's the hardest. That's the hardest part in growing a business and building that revenue. So I saw plenty of it from my dad, whether it was like, also, just trying to save money everywhere you can. And one of those examples was not paying professional janitorial staff and instead having my older brother and I clean the HVAC offices and the shop. Luckily, the shop was so dirty, you wouldn't know what a bad job we did. My mom would help on that side, thank goodness, because we went out for the challenge. But whether your family, whether your kids and your spouse are involved in your business day to day or not, it's still a sacrifice on their end. They're dealing with income in uncertainty. They're dealing with you working all the extra hours that come with running your own business, all that. So anybody who's ever done this can tell you, I was going to say the pain. It's not pain, but how much it's going to push you beyond any other job that you can work as a W-2 for somebody else. And if there's not, like you said, if there's not that reward at the end, if there's nothing to pursue too, hey, at the end of the day, somebody's going to steal all this money through financial fraud or through a ransomware case or something like that, that's where we feel passionate about it, where we come into very successful businesses or small emerging growth businesses. Either way, it's like we're protecting that American dream. I know that sounds corny. I'm sure the crowd's laughing, especially if any of my friends are in the crowd, but I sincerely mean that.
I think for a little bit of stretch of time, I think you're right. And we need to protect the American dream on a bunch of different fronts. And one of them is cyber. And I think for a stretch of time, I was looking at the economy and where we were, at in different places and after COVID in particular, and then some of the things we're seeing now with housing costs and just the way that it is, and I was thinking like, man, like American dream, like I was kind of feeling pessimistic about it. But then I thought about it a little bit, and like the cool thing about the American dream is that you have the freedom to put your time and attention towards whatever it is you want. And that's where the dream is absolutely still alive. And, there are times in life, in all people's lives, but also just in economic times that come and go for positive and for negative. And we should always be doing everything we can as a society to be creating more positive times. But that American dream is alive in the negative times as well as in the positive times. So, people may scoff at it, especially right now. But I think if you think deeply about what people are saying when they're saying the American dream, I think it's as alive as ever. And it was hard when people went to California for the first time for the gold rush. And it's fucking hard with AI, putting startups together and figuring out how to get people to work in remote environments and how to deal with cyber attacks and all these different fronts. It's hard if you really want to do your dream.
If you think the modern economy, and I don't mean to dismiss it, costs are high, things like that. Yeah. But if you think this is the hardest time, go watch Yellowstone. Right. And not the original, not the current, not the 1980s or 90s or whatever the latest season of Yellowstone is. I think it's 1883. And you can see what it was like to run a bar in 1883, what it was like to go conquer the West, go to the West to put your stake in the ground and build a ranch and build a family and a homestead and all that.
Right.
We've got it a lot better. Now, don't get me wrong. There's things we could do better. But whenever people get towards the pessimistic and say there's no American dream. To me, the American dream is just, do you have the opportunity to be upwardly mobile? Can you be born into poverty and do very well? Absolutely. There's no doubt. There's unlimited cases. We could spend the rest of this hour talking about them. And certainly there's downward mobility too. So no one who actually digs into the data actually thinks that don't see that there's endless opportunities like that. And I'll tell you the one that always makes me think. I'm very happy with Optimized Cyber. My co-founder, Stefan, our employees, love you guys. But if Optimized Cyber died tonight and I was a free agent, here's what I would do. I would buy a garbage truck. In any small town, there's always 3, 4, 5 garbage services that go. It's a smelly business. It's not a pretty business. But you drive around, you can do it cheaper than the national brands can. You go and pick up people's garbage, fill up your truck, go pay the fee at the dump. Yep. And there's money in that. And almost everywhere I've lived, I've seen the small husband and wife or, the mom and pop shop that did this with like a staff of starting with 2, 2, 3, maybe they got 10 now. Then they sell to the national brands. So that's what I was going to say is exiting a business, selling a business has probably never been easier. Good luck selling your fort in the middle of, along the Oregon Trail in the middle of Denver, right? Yeah. There's no exit capital. There's no building a safe nest egg there. It's way, we've got it pretty darn good today. That doesn't mean we can't fix things. I have a lot of thoughts on things we can fix, but the American dream is certainly alive and well.
First of all, your point, juxtaposing selling the fort and building a small business with equity that you can sell. It's just spot on. It's really funny and it's really spot on. I just imagine, it's some 1800 fool out there, talking to his wife, we got to get on the phone with a realtor. You know what I mean? But not existing.
I want to put this in I want to get this paid into my Bitcoin wallet. So it's fungible and transferable if I want to move to Bermuda, right? Probably not right now. I think I saw they have a hurricane coming in, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's hilarious imagery. And then also, and hilarious and spot on, but then also your point about hauling company. So for better or for worse, I have a wonderful family whom I've learned a ton from. Growing up, my dad and I were not always on the same page and not always communicating very regularly. So it wasn't so much the experience I had growing up, but that was his entrepreneurial endeavor. He started with a beat up pickup truck and built a hauling company in the St. Louis area that's I think started before Got Junk even, and did all of the scrappy things that you needed to know how to do at that time, getting listed at the top of the yellow pages, having billboards on your truck, those are things that in the 80s and 90s were golly, the phone number's right there. Can you believe it? And oh, wow, the AAA hauling, you know what I mean? Oh, wow, this is the first one. But those are the types of things that at that point in time were savvy, ahead of time things. And we just live in an era now where there's so many savvy ahead of time things that you could figure out how to do. And your point about that, if I were to have to start over, I'd build a hauling company. It's exactly the right way to think, because you're trading your time and labor for something that people don't want to do, but need to do. So the supply and demand is always there. You can beat the large national brands because they have to have a corporate office and they have to have insurance and they have to have, you always have to have insurance, but you know what I mean? They have to have insurance on their team and all these other, healthcare insurance and all that stuff, where when you're a solopreneur or a mom and pop shop, you can go about it for a more cost effective. You can go about it more cost effectively. And I think that's a great juxtaposition for what I believe the future of entrepreneurship is in general, because I think with AI, you can be building small businesses around clear and obvious need if you have the skill and the know-how and the tools to be able to do it, which, it's in the 80s and 90s, it was, do you have a truck? And now it's like, do you have access to some of these, AI models? Do you have enough competence to be able to get into GitHub and build your own X, Y, and Z, or network to do so? It's an interesting world we live in, for sure. And you're right, man, for sure.
I agree. I think there's a lot of smart kids at their computer right now using AI to build applications that used to take 300,000 in capital, a team of 3, a lot of expertise. Now it takes a lot less than that garbage truck that I'm referencing. Using AI and leveraging those tools, there's got to be a new app every 10 minutes coming out. I'm not saying they're all going to be the next, they're not all the next TikTok, right? They're not all going to be $1 trillion app, but the rate at which you can innovate, fail fast, create new apps, find the one that has that product market fit, and then run that like a business, right? Where you're web app pen testing it and getting it secured in SOC 2 and revenue recognition and building out an accounting function and all that. But the speed with which you can attempt things and either get them right or wrong, and then iterate and move forward has never been faster, and it's never taken less capital. So my biggest thing, especially talking to the next generation, is like, do not get discouraged. Yes, everything's expensive, but you'll figure it out. When Zach and I think you and I are about the same age. When our parents bought their first house, interest rates were 17%, 18% on a mortgage. Stuff happens, right? They didn't have it easy. My grandparents' generation, when they were buying their first house, they were getting drafted to go fight in World War II, right? Or going to Korea or going to Vietnam. Like, there's a lot worse things that can happen than prices are high. That doesn't mean we shouldn't work to bring prices down, build supply, all that, help people make more money, help them lift up their wages, help protect their American dream, and help them get a side hustle to make money and do all that stuff. I'm very much in favor of it. But don't feel sorry for yourself, and certainly don't convince yourself that the American dream is dead, because there's young folks right now that are bootstrapping an application that they built with AI, that they hacked together in GitHub, like you talked about, that have built up to 3-5 million in revenue, recurring revenue, without taking a dime of investor money, without having to have a team or institutional support. And if the next generation's working hard enough and things like that, our American dream might look different, but it's certainly not dead. Right.
And just to that point, and then we'll transition into topic of the day. Competition is good, and people being able to utilize, just like it's good for somebody like, my father or other members of my family who've done hauling, to be able to start a business for low cost and then hold prices in the economy at a place because of competition, or to be able to provide unique value that forces other competition to innovate. The competition is really, really good. And if anybody's able to start a hauling company that makes hauling competitive, and that's good for people that need hauling done. And the same thing is true in tech and in social media and all of this massive data aggregation. If we can get people with unique and creative ideas able to get their unique and creative idea on the field Doesn't even have, like you said, it doesn't have to be the next $1 trillion thing. But in the game, if we can get it in the game, which if you don't have to have that $300,000 investment in a team of coders to be able to build it, you can get in the game a lot easier. Then it forces your Metas and your Amazons and your Googles and your tech giants to innovate. And I'm all for companies getting big and being valuable, but they have to be big and valuable. And when you have competition, it forces them to have to continue to be valuable because there's competition that can take that value if they're not. And that's good for everybody. In the same way, it's good for those who need hauling.
100%. The reason my waste management bill was lower is because two people in my town, well, I'm not going to say their names, but I know their names because it's a husband and wife. And because they did this and they bootstrapped and worked hard and did that, they're able to do it with a local touch, better, faster, cheaper. And we benefit from that. So that's how society advances. That's how TVs get better. Remember the first plasma TVs that were $4,000? Now you can get, and those were the Michael Scott, 18-inch, right? Now people are getting 64 inches for what, $300, something like that. So innovation's good for everybody, and it's good for humanity, I guess, at the end of the day. And it's also good as an entrepreneur to sharpen your iron, because I remember when I was in 5th grade, I made this travel basketball team, and they played a national schedule. So we were going to have a tournament down in Florida. Coming from Minnesota, that was a big deal, right? And we were walking out of there, and my dad's like, "I'm not paying for that team." And I was like, "What?" I was like heartbroken. And he's like, "I'm not paying to send you to Florida to play basketball when there's still guys around here who can kick your ass." And I thought, the heartbreak went away. I was just like, man, he's right. Like, it's not fair for me to, until you're as sharp as you can. Like, I just took it that way. That like, until you're as sharp as you can, keep getting better. But the main point was like, go compete more around here, sharpen your skills, get better, learn how to compete. And I think all those dumb little childhood activities we do, that's all building us up for the real world and the real competition, which, like you said, is how are you going to carve out a niche when there's Meta, Google, Amazon, right? How are you going to find anything to do? Well, compete harder and figure it out, because you can move faster. You have advantages that they don't. They have trillions of dollars that you don't, but you have advantages that they don't, meaning you can move quicker, try things faster, fail faster, improve faster, and find that niche that's underserved.
Yeah. And listen, that's what allows people to go faster. At Amazon, it's telephone all the way up. And it's telephone all the way up on however many team members they have is the number of people, on different pathways that are trying to communicate, So if you're able to, as an entrepreneur, really listen to your customers and to what's happening in the economy, you will be able to be ahead. And that's the thing, and that's the David and Goliath. It's the mouse with the thorn in the lion's paw. It's always been the story that it's always been humanity's story that we all have intrinsic value, and that it's just about finding where it needs to be. So cool. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you diving into your entrepreneurial journey. This has been a blast. We've got about 25 minutes left here for our topic of the day, which is how cyber attackers conduct financial fraud, and how I guess people can kind of be thoughtful about that type of thing in their business and personal life, I guess.
Well, we picked a tough topic because in the last 3 weeks, I've heard a couple new attack vectors of what attackers are doing to steal money from people and businesses in America. And at the end of the day, The most important thing we can talk about today is, as a cybersecurity professional, what makes the Hollywood movies, the TV shows, the national news, all that stuff is frequently the hacker stories, the ransomware stories. Somebody with a hoodie, right? Some bad guy out there who's doing impossible things to get in. That's not the majority of how money is lost, not by a long shot, especially in the SMB. Entrepreneurs, I would say any company below 1,000 employees, actually, unless you have a huge IoT network and things like that. But anyone under 1,000 employees, the biggest risk to your company is financial fraud. That's historically that's been conducted predominantly through business email compromises. And what I recommend to anyone listening who wants to dive in further on this is go to a whiteboard and draw out, how does money come? Here's our organization in the middle. How does money come in? How does money go out? And write down all the different attack surfaces there. So how this predominantly happens. Zach's a client of ours. He owes us $10,000. I send him an invoice via email. And then Zach sends money to the bad guy. That's typically how people find out that there's a financial fraud problem happening. What that can look like an email attacker who's in my network, who has my email and edits the account info, right? Edits the checking and routing numbers and gets money sent to them. That can look like somebody on Zach's side, who's breached Zach's account and says, and sets up rules so that they intercept that invoice before releasing it to the real Zach. And at that point, they can change those checking and routing numbers. So it's become more important than ever to have callback functions where on large dollar transactions, Zach calls me and validates that. Zach calls whoever our point of contact is on accounts receivables from my company. There's a number of different ways to do this, but the most important things to do are safeguard your email account and safeguard your bank account. Unfortunately, still, there's a lot of folks who don't have multi-factor authentication on their bank accounts. Let's make sure to get that corrected right away. The other thing is be mindful of everything else that you might be paying from. We talk to small businesses from time to time who are paying contractors through Zelle or PayPal, or what's the other one? I don't use it, but Cash App, yeah, that kind of stuff. Right. Venmo, Cash App, that kind of stuff. So now these are additional accounts that if somebody gets your Venmo, if somebody gets your Cash App, if somebody gets your PayPal, they can send money out of your bank account. So that's predominantly what it is. And now we've gotten to a place where there's a lot of phone calls. Phone calls can be very sophisticated or very low level. This can happen through social media, obviously. Can happen a lot of different vectors. So security awareness training is very important. And then there's protocols that organizations need to set up to ensure that it's difficult to get money out of your bank account and make it more difficult for attackers to convince your clients that there's a new bank account they should send money to.
I worry about this with my grandmother all the time. And I know that's not necessarily the specific focus of today's conversation.
That's more important to me. Let's talk about your grandma. That's more important. That's as important as I'm dead serious. Like this happens to America. Well, this happens to a lot of individuals, and there's a lot we can do, especially as tech-enabled business people.
When I hear you say, this is the thing that got me down that train of thought, but when I hear you say we need better systems for validating these transactions need to happen, or the transactions that need to happen or that are happening, and some of the stuff is really obvious and good for people that have a base level of technological understanding. MFA, some of these callback things, some of these, you've got your biometric scans with your eyes, and you've got your, your fingerprint, and you've got your chips, and all that stuff's really good, and can be really helpful. The things that worry me, or where I get worried, is when we have large segments of our community and society that just don't have that knowledge, and they're not set up in such a way to be able to educate themselves on how to use the defensive tools that exist. Those are the people that are vulnerable the most, and when I hear you say, like, I've thought, like, how can banks help older folks, or those who are less technically savvy, prevent these types of things from happening? And I guess, what are your thoughts on
I have
that?
a lot of thoughts, and thank you for bringing this up, because I did want to talk about this more, because everybody thinks of old people, but this is also targeting 10, 12, 16-year-old kids. Probably the most common is fake Facebook profiles or Instagram. For grandma, it's probably different channels for grandma versus that kid. Can be TikTok, whatever. But how easy is it with AI tools for me to make a digital Zach and start a digital Zach Facebook page, and then connect with your grandma, because that's pretty easy to pull out from open source, and then message grandma that I need to borrow money. First connect, a month early, and say, hey, my old Facebook got hacked. Can you add this? I'm adding you back here, grandma. Love you. And then a month later, they start asking for money and figuring out how to steal money from her. Same thing's happening to kids. It's usually just different. For teenage boys, it's a supermodel that for some reason loves this 13-year-old kid. And they start falling in love with sometimes an AI chatbot, sometimes an actual human on the other end. They start asking for money, or worse, they start, I don't even know how to say this, swapping pictures, and then the other end is blackmailing the high school kid over these pictures, right? That's pretty common. You can search this when we hang up. You'll be disgusted all afternoon. But anyway, so how do we stop this? Here's the bad news. The bad news is the attack methods, how attackers can get at these elderly folks, at kids, at all of us. The attack methods are exponentially higher than ever. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. The banks are trying to do things to help. And I would argue that there's never been, in the digital banking world, there's never been better tools available to us. So first, let's start with your grandma. Here's sincerely what I would do. 100% serious. I don't know where she's banking. I don't care. You don't have to mention it. But I would find a regional bank close to her residence, or credit union. So find a credit union or a bank close to her that has a regional presence, that she can go in and meet with a banker. So by that, I'm mentioning, kind of a smaller credit union, smaller bank. I'm not recommending, one branch. It can be a national chain, but somebody you can have a relationship with. Go in there, you and grandma go in there together. Set up two things. Set up notifications on her account. First thing is, grandma needs to authorize that, not that Zach can take money out of her account, but that the bank can communicate with you if there's ever an issue and you need to help her recover funds or something like that. Establishing that relationship first. Second thing, you can set up text notifications. So every time, you could set it for a certain dollar amount, you could set it up for every transaction, but certainly over $500, Zach gets a notification. If more than $500 comes out of grandma's account, you get a text message. And that gives you the ability to check, because every month, here's one more thing I'd recommend. Tell her, we're going to get you a credit card. We're going to set it up on auto pay, so it's paid off every month. I know a lot of grandparents, a lot of people don't like credit cards because you can get into credit card debt and really hurt yourself, right? I'm not recommending that. Let's set up auto pay on a monthly basis where your bank account, let's say it's paying your social security, health insurance supplement, or your Medicare supplement. It's receiving your social security payment, maybe some IRA money's coming in. It's paying your mortgage or rent, and it pays your credit card in full. Everything else can be on the credit card. Now Zach's going to get all the notifications. So he sees, wait, you did an ACH, you did a wire? That seems weird. Or, hey, grandma, I saw a $4,000 check. Did you write that? Yeah, it was my favorite grandson's birthday, not Zach, but it's my favorite. I gave him $4,000. You can
shout out to Shane.
You can validate it that way, right? And have that personal touch with her. The reason I bring up credit cards is it's very easy to get credit card transactions turned around if there's ever card fraud, right? If anybody ever steals your card number, she's online shopping, she goes to the wrong website, it gets stolen. It's very easy to get those credit card transactions turned around. It's much harder with debit card once it's cleared. And then the other thing you can set up is something called positive pay. A lot of banks have this now, where it's a portal where somebody does check fraud against your grandma, right? They print checks and they start writing checks to themselves and signing her name. You get to log in and see those checks before they clear, and you can either click approve or not approve. And you can,
I wish they had a button that let me hit that person with a baseball bat.
Or a drone strike. You're a little more forgiving than me, but so positive pay enables you to limit if there's a debit charge, if there's a wire, ACH, anything like that. You can accept or decline. By the way, do this for your businesses too, especially once accounts reach a certain dollar amount where, hey, we got something to worry about here, right? Early in the entrepreneurial journey, it's probably cash in, cash out. But once you have some money built up, use positive pay to make sure those checks don't clear. There's no ACHs or wires. Use those notifications for your business. That's exactly what I would do for grandma. And that's what I would do with any kids that have a bank account too. So you can catch anything fishy, before it gets ugly.
Fishy, pun intended.
Yeah.
So I love that, and thank you so much for going into so much depth. I have a thought here. So it makes what you're. Oh God, I just love all this. So it's such a good idea to use the credit card that way, and then you also get the benefit of. There's two benefits. One, there's like the points, which is like a very minor benefit, but for a business, if you do it that way, it becomes a major benefit. But if you're taking all of the risk on the credit card with grandma, then it's like you said, instead of having to fight with the bank to get the money back, the credit card companies are already expecting some level of fraud. So when those types of things happen, they're more readily capable of dealing with it and expecting it. The banks don't want that shit to happen at all.
On the credit card side, they don't fight you. They just take the money back.
Right.
If somebody stole Zach's credit card and used it on, let's say they have a cutout, like a cutout LLC where they can scan those credit cards and steal that money. Visa does not care. There's no discussion. They claw that money back and they say, no, that's not your money. We're not clearing. That's not going through our clearinghouse, and you get a credit. Now it's on the fraudsters to go in and say, no, actually, Zach did do this. If you start doing this frequently, Visa is going to say, Zach, what the hell? This can't all be fraud.
This is fraud.
If you're
doing fraud about
you're defrauding them based on fraud, you're going to have, a felony and a big problem. So I don't recommend doing that. But for legitimate fraud, it's super easy for Visa, Amex, Discover Card or MasterCard. What is it? Yeah, whatever. All the credit card companies to go in and say, oh, that money doesn't clear. That was a fraudster, money back. Now there's a police report. Now people are trying, if that is, somebody here that can be arrested. Now there's a police report and people looking for them. And I would say, and on the bank side, something that you said, if your bank is fighting you, you need to have a new bank. Your bank should be your advocate on this. Like,
If any of their business associates are fighting you, whether it's your bank, your accountant, your IT service provider,
you need to find a new one. Your bank should be your advocate for this. That's why I said grandma should have one that's 2 minutes from her house or 10 minutes from her house, is because if Zach can't be there, she can drive in. I don't want your grandma to be on a phone tree or a screen share, or like those are her only methods. Hell no. Grandma should be able to walk down the block or drive to the bank, and she better be taken care of because you have that pre-existing relationship. So establish that banking relationship early, where that credit union is going to go to bat for you. That regional bank is going to go to bat for you and have your back. And I've had a lot of success with that, with I'll call it community banks or local credit unions, because they're in your community and they are there to serve.
Absolutely. I've got one last thought, and then we'll make our way towards wrapping up. We'll have a moment for you to tell everybody about Optimized Cyber a little bit in more depth and how they can get a hold of you. But I want to pitch an idea to you that's for banks. So neither of us are going to capitalize on it. But does it seem like if banks took some of the money that they're paying out to fraud, and they applied it within the company to jobs focused on communicating with those that are likely to be defrauded about what you just described? So like somebody at local credit union calls grandma, hey, I'm a representative at local credit union. It's my job all day to call people and try to set up some of these different security protocols. You fit the description of somebody to get these benefits or whatever, however they can say it so that the person doesn't feel, talked down to, but rather they're engaging in a mutually beneficial exercise, so that the bank doesn't lose money in fraud and lawyer fees, and so grandmas don't lose money in fraud.
I know many financial institutions that are attempting to do that. The best way to do it, that candidly, Zach, I don't think it's a great idea over the phone, because that sounds weird. Somebody calls up, says, I want to talk about your fraud problem. I'm probably hanging up, and I do this for a living. I know a lot of community banks and community credit unions that are putting on community events. Man, I said community like 7 times. These regional banks and credit unions that are putting on events for the community to learn about these features, to learn the advantages of having a local financial institution. A lot of banks still out there that are focused on, come into our branch, let's talk about what you need. That are doing this the right way. So I can tell you a large number of them are. I've participated in a dozen or so in the last 2 years, just to educate the same way we just spoke about it. We don't do any business with individuals, so it's not biz dev for us, but it's an area of passion. It's something that we like doing. So we'll go out there with credit unions, regional banks, and put on these events. Because if I did one in a church with 6 or 7 people, and this sweet lady came up to me, and her Chase bank account had been breached that day. Nothing the bank did wrong. It was entirely an email phishing scam that she fell for. But we were able to get on top of it that day to say, hey, we're going to get your banks all aligned right now, this minute, because with financial fraud, you do typically have 48 hours to claw that money back. So get on it quickly, and don't be afraid, because they handle, I've seen hundreds of these cases. Your average bank has probably seen 1,000 in the last year. So there's nothing there's nothing stupid that any of us have done that they haven't seen 20 times already. And I'd really just like to encourage people, based on the prevalence, to make a plan around this, get that regional credit union, that regional bank to have your back, and walk you through these options, because almost all of them have these options. People just don't ask. It's a little bit like Microsoft. You open a new email account. By nature, it's pretty open because they want it to be easy for you to use. They want you to use their service. But you can secure it very, very tightly without spending any more money, just by knowing the right levers to pull. And in the financial services realm, that's your bank, that's your credit union. They can pull those levers for you. So yeah, I agree completely. We need more events to share this with the public and to get the public more informed, so that they build these methods to prevent this in advance, and to have that person there that they can rely on if something bad ever does happen.
This was a blast. This was a lot of fun and educational. Matt, thank you so much for being here. Let's take a moment to do a little bit of wrap up here. How can folks get a hold of you, and what exactly does Optimize Cyber do?
Awesome. Yeah. And thanks so much for having me, Zach. This was really fun. Optimize Cyber, we're an offensive security firm. So what that means is before you have a breach, before you have an issue, we come in and help businesses set up plans around financial fraud and everything on the IT security infrastructure on that side, to build resilient programs. So we're not managing your IT for you, but we're helping you build that security program to protect your small and medium business. We do a lot of ethical hacking, so finding what a bad guy would find in an application, in a network, in anything like that, in your manufacturing robots, and finding those things before a bad guy does, so that our clients can fix them. That's what we're focused on. So, and if you have any questions about a financial fraud plan, a way to prevent ransomware and make ourselves more secure as an organization, just hit our website, optimizecyber.com. You'll get routed right in. We'll figure it out.
Awesome. Matt, thanks again for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. And to the folks that joined us live today, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Zach.
Matt.
Thanks, everybody.